So it's midnight. It's vampire time again. Tonight we explore Karl Theodore Dreyer's Vampyr from 1932. I find the film both haunted and haunting. Haunted because it evokes ghosts when a locked door opens at night in a French village in black and white. That's haunted. And it's haunting if you go there with it. If you go to that village, it can leave you feeling things, uncomfortable things, and things that you can't quite understand. It's very dreamlike. Um, what about you, Rick? How did it make you feel?
The first time I watched it, I've watched it twice now, and the first probably half of the film bored the shit out of me. I don't know. I was having a hard time getting into it. I was watching it, and I was falling victim to the thing that I warn people about the most, is in that you have to watch a film in the context of the times in which it was made, which is to say you have to watch a silent era film that is slower, more meditative, and interested in showing. And then there is a moment in the film where the main character falls into a dream world, and from that moment on, it grabbed a hold of me, and it didn't let go, and it was a pretty incredible feeling, because I remembered what I was reminded of, the power of the image and what storytelling was capable of when certain tools were removed from the toolbox. I watched it again last night, and the beginning of it was much better because I knew what I was watching for. I knew what I was waiting for. That first viewing made me feel as though I was watching something that had been overhyped and had been elevated to a certain level for historical and artistic, that sense of, this is something that we can champion. By the end of the film, I realized why the film has kept the reputation that it's kept. And it's interesting because the film, when it was originally released in 32, it was critically lambasted. Audiences didn't particularly care for it. Dreyer ended up having to take it back into the editing room, cut it, and he went somewhat insane for a short period and was in a mental institution dealing with the consequences of the failure of the film. But it also came out, I think he had put in a lot of his own fortune, and a lot of his reputation was hinging on the fact that this was supposed to be his follow-up to The Passion of Joan of Arc, which itself was also a box office, I don't know if it was a full-on box office failure, but it was definitely not a film that pulled in audiences the way it was either expected to or he felt that it deserved. Now, I've never seen The Passion of Joan of Arc, and it's a film that I have heard nothing but great things from the readings that I've made on it. But this film definitely makes me want to sit down and watch it. There are two things that kind of bothered me during the watching of this film, during the viewing. And the first was simple, that it was slow. Plotting, just it was difficult to get into that first viewing. And the second thing was, I think this is a legitimate criticism of the film. This film was trying to serve two masters, in that 31, 32, you had the advent of sound from, I think, like 1930 right onward. And this film doesn't do a good job of adding sound to the soundtrack. It doesn't utilize sound in a way that advances the story, and it uses a great many intertitles and cuts to a book that is being read, so that it feels as though it wants to be a silent film. And I think it would have been served. I think it would have been served much more. It would be an artistically better film if it had been a silent film completely, with maybe certain sound effects that were layered in there, because they used to do that. You know, there would be, I think in Sunrise. Sunrise is a Murnau film, silent, and he layered traffic sounds and crowd noises, but not. It was never sync sound. So this is a film that could have been made much better if it had stuck to what it seems to want to be, which is Dreyer's original intention of making it a silent film. I don't know if that bothered you, but it as a viewer, you watch it and or at least I watch it, and I feel that what's really holding it back is the director being forced to include a new technology that he neither understands fully or is ready, and because he's not fully, he doesn't fully understand it, he's not ready to utilize it to its best effect. So that was my feeling. You call it haunting and haunted, which I think it is. It's I think it's a powerful film, and by the end, it has one of the greatest images that I've ever seen on cinema and on screen. That of a man being buried alive in a flour mill. I love that. I thought it was incredible. But that being that, let's dive in, take this movie on, and see where our heads are at with it. What, as always, what is your relationship to the film? Were you aware of it? Did you know what it was? Had you heard of it? What information did you have going into your first viewing? I imagine this was your first viewing of it, correct?
Yeah, so I had heard of it because I think you talk about the Passion of Joan of Arc, and
Mm-hmm.
if you looked at like film history books or if you know enough about like film history, you've seen some of those images or clips, because I've seen clips. I haven't seen that film, but I've seen clips of it. And it's powerful on its own, but I think it's built up
Mm-hmm.
within the history of cinema to be seen as powerful, like seminal early work from the late 20s or whatever it is. And I knew about this movie. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know about the making of it, but I just knew that it was him, Dreyer, and I knew that it existed. And I put some of it on our honeymoon, so almost a year ago, and we were staying in this castle, which ended up being haunted. Well, it didn't end up. It was already. We knew that it was haunted, but we ended up experiencing weirdness, and we I had it on just, and I wasn't even like really even looking at it. I just put it on while I was like unpacking or whatever, because they had a TV and they had YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
and so I saw some of the images, and there was like a man with a scythe,
Yeah.
and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to come back to this, and really dive in and sit with this, and that was it, and I ended up buying that ticket for this episode, and it's very slow. It's poetic. It's eerie. It's atmospheric. It's got a shadowy and it deals with shadows the way it did. I mean, on a Jungian level, it deals with shadow, but it ends up doing things that are really interesting with the camera. And like you say, it's a silent film with sound. So to me, I don't know any of the background. I don't know if how he felt about the technology or any of that. But it felt to me very much that it was like on that cusp, and it was transitioning from the methods and the approach of one type of cinema to now the approach of the other. And so it was like it had its. You describe it as like it's trying to serve two masters. To me, I just see it as having like one foot on the shore and one in the water, without fully having gone over it yet. By the time it gets into that dreamlike area, because it takes a while to build into it, and you're kind of you, the viewer, and the character himself, because the story is based on this. It's about a character named Alan Gray, who's a student of the occult. He's interested in occult shit, and he visits a French village, and the French village is under. It turns out that it's under this vampire's curse, and so he's just there, and he starts to experience weird things in the night, ghostly things. And as a character, you're kind of you are watching it in this kind of way, and the character is kind of like a Jimmy Stewart, like in a Hitchcock film, where he's just witnessing, he's observing things, and shit starts to get more and more bizarre. Or even more so like a Kyle MacLachlan in a David Lynch film, where he's trying to piece everything together in this stuff it's as if elements of the underworld are like coming up into the so-called normal world. Or even like, it reminded me also of the woman from Carnival of Lost Souls. She's in this haunted place, and so you're trying to figure it out while he is, and eventually it feels like reality itself just kind of breaks, or it overlaps in the same way that like the silent film overlaps with the sound film. Normal everyday reality overlaps with this dream reality. The part that really like catches your interest, because it seems, I guess, so dull in the beginning, or so slow, that by the time shit gets weird, you're open to it, because you're like, whoa, what is that? In the same way that, like, I'm sure small towns everywhere they seem dull, they seem the same, but underneath is bubbling all of this other weird, dark shit that people aren't supposed to know about or talk about, and they don't talk about it openly, but it's there. And then he starts to do things with the camera, and it's disorienting, and there's moments where the character's like translucent, but then there are other moments where everything's like really like misty looking and opaque, and I couldn't tell the difference between the night and the day, which I also thought was cool. So that, especially the second part, was cool to watch because I'm you you can look at it and say, well, how was this shot? Well, what are they doing? Blah blah. Or else you can just be kind of like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm looking at. And but these images are beautiful, and so I went along for that ride.
As I watched it that first time, it was when it got me. So it helped. I'll say this much, that when you watch movies, and I've said it in the past, it's the wealth of your movie watching experience informs whatever new viewing that you take. So, although this is a film that is 1932 and it's an early vampire film, your viewing of it is it is shaped and in some way warped by the movies that you have seen before, the vampire depictions that you have seen before, whether that's Chris Sarandon, Lance Henriksen that we'll see in Near Dark in a couple of weeks, Max Schreck, and of course Bella. So all of that goes into it, and it gives you an idea of what it's beyond your control to know that you are watching something that is supposed to hit certain beats. Supposed to. Doesn't mean that it has to. And it can be a little bit problematic until you separate yourself from the time. And part of the reason that this film was a failure when it was originally released, and it's gone on to build a better reputation, is because now it's looked at it within the context of the films that surround it and what it has influenced. And I think there's a lot here, both in mood and intention of what Dreyer was doing. He was going out of his way to make something really different. When this was released in 1932, they held off the release roughly 9 months because, and the release in Germany, because they knew that it would be competing with Todd Browning's 31 Dracula and James Whale's 31 Frankenstein. So they waited to release it after that. And I think that was a huge mistake back then, because much like now, Browning's Dracula and James Whale's, the world that James Whale created with the Frankenstein film, became the de facto experience of this kind of story, the horror story, the castle in a foreign, well, it wouldn't have been a foreign country, but at least a rural kind of isolated place. The power of vampires. I don't know how powerful the Bram Stoker influence would have been at this time. I don't know how many people would have read that book. But the very emergence of Browning's vision would basically shape everything that would come after it. I mean, even vampire movies that come out today owe a great deal of influence to what Browning did. Whether it be the mystery or the sexiness or the mood of a piece, they're all effectively part of Browning's vision, even if they're going against what Browning did. Like it's an opposite. It's like they're all children of Todd Browning, and they're either trying to live up to that or trying to break away from it. What Dreyer was doing was completely different. He hadn't seen Browning's film. I think he had made his film before, and it was a bad choice to release it afterwards. There were riots in at the premiere. People were upset by the film, demanding their money back, being refused of that request, and small riots breaking out that had to be suppressed. And that's why, because they didn't like the film. I personally believe that an audience can be trained, and most training is a bad thing when it comes to how you view art. Now, if you're looking at the practices and rules and what goes into making something, that's one thing. But when you look at parameters as something that you can't break away from, then you limit yourself as a viewer as to what you're going to be able to see and how it's going to affect you. There's a couple of moments in this film. There's a young woman who's dying in her bed. She's been bitten by a vampire, and she's looking up at, I believe, her sister. And I don't know if you noticed this, but it's the 180-degree rule, which is if you place a line across a scene, the camera cannot jump from one side to the other side of that line to take the shot, because now eye lines don't match, and it becomes very difficult and disconcerting for the viewer to understand exactly what's going on. Did you notice that?
No, because the whole thing was 180 rule breaking.
Yeah, that's the thing. The whole thing, in a sense, I don't know if he knew he was breaking rules, if he didn't care if he was breaking rules, or if the rules hadn't been established for him at that point. But a lot of the rules that govern cinema were created in the early 20s by D.W. Griffith and Chaplin to a degree, Buster Keaton, and other directors of that time who were working in that silent era. So I find it hard to imagine that he was either a sloppy filmmaker or he didn't understand it. I'd have to see Passion of Joan of Arc and some of his other films. Passion of Joan of Arc and Man of the House, I think, is a film that he did in order to really understand what he did, what he knew and what he didn't know as far as the rules of filmmaking. But that's a very standard rule that I saw him break in this film and made it difficult to understand where placement was. Some of these rules are there just so that you make sure that the audience is aware of spatial positioning.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not there, then it becomes a confusing thing. So that's a problem that I saw there, but it didn't bother me so much because so much of it was, there was a randomness to his filmmaking. In some cases, too much headspace, I felt, but the shots that did work were overwhelming. And once Alan Gray, who goes to this house and has all these, would you call them out-of-body experiences or what? It's very strange that it's a haunted village, basically, and you start finding that out slowly. An old man comes to him, gives him a book that's packaged and is said, and he writes on it, "To be opened upon my death." And Gray opens it when the man is shot and killed. I don't know about you, but there were certain elements of it, like, you never really knew what happened to the vampire in the film. the old man, who shot the old man, um, who exactly was the peg-legged man, questions that don't really get answered, but that it doesn't matter because the movie is a lot like a nightmare that you're sitting there going, none of this makes sense, but it doesn't make sense in the way that a nightmare doesn't make sense. I
In
don't
the
know
way
if
that what? Oh, a nightmare.
it doesn't make sense in the way that a nightmare doesn't make sense, where all you know is that the nightmares that I've had have all been based on this idea that I'm in danger and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And things, and there's some, I think this film captures that. I don't know if that was what his original intention was, but that's the way I felt. This is definitely not Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's not Nosferatu. It's not the Murnau film. It's not the Todd Browning film. Both of those films are more straightforward narratives. This has elements of a narrative to it, but it breaks away from narrative so often that it makes me wonder what the hell it was that Dreyer was actually. It's more stream of consciousness than anything. And once I gave myself over to that, it became a much more enriching experience. I felt like I was watching something where I couldn't get ahead of the story. I just had to watch it, and I just had to be prepared for wherever the hell it was going to take me, and that was very liberating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why the first viewing I wasn't prepared. The second viewing, yeah.
The second viewing?
The second viewing, I had a better understanding of just allow it to happen. Just take it in. And if certain elements of the plot are not resolved, then I don't have to beat the shit out of myself trying to figure out what the puzzle is, because I know it doesn't make sense. It doesn't come together with an explanation. And I think a lot of times that's a difficult thing to accept in a movie. But in this film, it wasn't. It's the power of the artist to create something that you want to invest in. Some directors can do it, some directors can't do it. Some directors can do it with one film and can't do it with another film. If you've ever seen Malick's later work, The Thin Red Line, Tree of Life are both beautiful. But there's almost no structural narrative there. But if you go to King of Cups, and from what I've heard, To the Wonder, I think it's To the Wonder, neither of those films work because Malick doesn't capture that poetic magic that is there in the previous films. I mean, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. I certainly think that this film gets it, grabs a hold of it, and is able to present it to an audience in a way that makes you want to enjoy it. Now, that's not to say that I would recommend this film. The further along that we go in this process that we do week to week, the more I realize that it's not really about recommending films to people.
Yeah. I agree.
It's more about experiencing something, and I don't know who I would recommend this film to, aside from you. But I don't know of many people who wouldn't come back to me if they made it through this film. I don't know of many people who would come back to me and say, "God damn, thanks a lot for recommending that." Most of them would be like, "What the fuck are you doing recommending me that shit?" And maybe that's an elitist view, but I think it's our right to have certain things in this world that you care about so much that you see the power of them, even if others don't. And
I mean, yeah, that's what makes life grand.
Mm-hmm. But it's also the kind of thing where it makes you wonder, well, am I right? I don't know if you ever question yourself on. There used to be a time where I was like, well, am I making too much out of this, or is it really there? And at this point, I can trust in the fact that if it hits you on a visceral level, that's something that you can't control. You can't control being frightened by something. You can't control laughing at something. If something hits you in a certain way, it's either going to scare you or it's going to make you laugh. In those particular type of situations, if I hear something that is mean-spirited and offensive or cruel and just, in bad taste, if my initial reaction is to laugh, it doesn't mean that it wasn't in bad taste or offensive or cruel or mean-spirited. It just means that it was also funny. So with something like this, although I don't think the majority of people would embrace this film in the way that I am doing right now and did over the last 2 nights, I would still say this is an experience that I feel hits and it gives you something. It gives you it's a gift. Because how many times do you watch something that just is very blasé? Doesn't have heart or purpose or any kind of meaning outside of just perhaps either a good time or an escape. I mean, people talk about movies, and I think a great number of people believe that movies should only be about entertaining. And I think a movie should entertain you, because I was entertained by this. But it's that's semantics as well, though, because it's when I feel like I'm being when I feel like I'm growing in an experience, I'm growing from the experience of watching something. When there's a certain enlightenment, that's entertaining to me. That's enjoyment to me. I enjoy that in a different way than the one time that I went to a Transformers movie, and then the first time that one of the cars turned into a machine. I don't know if you saw this, if you remember, if you ever went to a Transformers movie, but when it made that sound, you know the sound I'm talking about?
No, I don't think. Maybe. I mean, is it the one that they would use in the cartoons?
In the cartoons.
Yeah.
They used the sound in the movie that they used in the cartoons. In that instant, that split second that I heard that on the screen, the first time in probably 20 years, it took me back to being 8, 9 years old when you would watch it on TV. Now you could call that a cheat, or you could call that a cheap exploitation of nostalgia from a director's standpoint, but it hits you.
It's evocative.
Yes,
and that's magic.
Yeah, and that's
time travel.
That's the same thing here, where it's I don't know why this is I don't know why this is affecting me the way that it's affecting me, but I know enough to enjoy it. I know enough to give myself over to it and to allow myself to take this journey with Dreyer as director and the actors and the story for something that ultimately is either going to be wonderful or might be wonderful up until a point and disappoint me in the end. That has happened in movies. But I got to say, this was, yeah.
No.
What's that?
I said that, and in that, on those journeys, you never know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about movies. You have to be willing to take that chance. It's you know, I tell my mom this because my mom doesn't like to experience new things. She doesn't like to try new restaurants, or if she goes to a restaurant, she gets the same thing. She's one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because she doesn't want to waste her money trying something new that she might not like. And I say, one of the great lessons that I learned from Anthony Bourdain from watching his show is, you really, in order to experience greatness, you have to take the risk of having a bad meal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't see too many bad films, but I see a shit ton of mediocre films. And if I got to watch those mediocre shit films in order to see something great, that's the price that you pay. But it's we wouldn't be taught. I don't know if I would have seen this film if we hadn't decided, hey, let's talk about vampires again this Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something very. There's a moment when you realize that opportunity is presenting itself to you. You have to take advantage of that opportunity. And for me, watching a movie like this is taking advantage of it, because I would have put it off for a long time. But it's opening a cinematic door, because sometime between now and next week, I will sit down and put on The Passion of Joan of Arc.
Or what's the other one? Days of Wrath, or something like that.
I'm not sure what his other films are.
That's the one about the witch hunts.
Okay, that could be fun too. The fact of the fact of it is, though, that when you're willing to allow yourself to experience the full buffet of cinema, you really you take a chance. And sometimes the reward is there, and sometimes the reward is not there. But you won't be rewarded simply watching Star Wars again for the 90th time, or Midnight Run for me, you know. But there's something to be said about one thing that I think this show gives us the opportunity to do is, and I hope we start exploring it, watching films from different perspectives. So instead of watching a film as an entire experience, like, for example, if we were to watch Blade Runner again, would we sit there and go on for the millionth time about whether or not Harrison Ford is a replicant?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Or would we talk about the fragility of human existence and the power of the soul, the existential nature of humanity, human existence? Or could we take a look at the Deckard character and look at him as the great-great-great-great-grandson of Humphrey Bogart, Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe? Can we look at how the role of the private eye has changed in film but has basically stayed the same. Cynical, pessimistic, alcoholic, contempt for humanity, but a spark of hope. As far as I know, nobody has looked at it from that perspective. So we could go back to Dracula. We could go back and look at Bella and see where are the moments when does Bella at any time show the agony of being alive for hundreds of years? How does that affect the character? This idea of being unable to die. So instead of it just being a scary movie at Halloween, or a sexy vampire, or the origin of the screen vampire, to understand the psychology of the character is an angle that you can look at in the movie. That's I think that's something that sets us apart as movie reviewers, cultural, because I don't see this show as being simply a movie review show. It's movie reviews, it's cultural criticism, it's artistic criticism, and I like the idea of breaking up movies to find out to find the marrow. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's also, I mean, it's touching on film and film watching as ritual, as that's how I like to look at it, because it is, and we talk about that, like the sitting in the dark, being in front of this instead of a fire, like our ancestors would have done. It's the screen, and being present, and being, in that sense, it's like shamanic too, because it's like these waves of light, these rays are hitting you, and you're being transported somewhere beyond your own life, beyond your own world, beyond your own ego. Even if you're there, if you're just being entertained, it's still doing something to you. In that sense, it's like a drug. It's you can take a drug just to, oh, I'm gonna laugh for the next however long, or it's gonna be this fucking spiritual thing that's gonna give me insight into my reality. What Terence McKenna called the felt presence of direct experience. It can be something that challenges you because it's scary. Now that you've let this thing into you, this drug, this movie, this film, it can be something that doesn't speak to you, and you're like, well, that spirit, or if it's a distilled drink, right? To use that metaphor, it's this is not my spirit. This is one person is more of a tequila person, the other person may be more of a mezcal. They're like, well, I want the smoke, I want the flame, and it's completely subjective. But like you say, the idea is taking it to the restaurant, like, and I think all of these positions are valid, because I think the idea of, like, if you have your place, that for certain occasions you go to that place, or even if it's just once a week, or even if it's just every morning you go to your spot.
Yeah.
and you get your thing. There's a place nearby here to my mom's that I always get the same coffee. I like to support them because they're a local coffee shop and I want to support that. But I always get the same thing, and so they know what I want, and that's for that. If I go somewhere else to a new place, maybe I'm gonna try what I get, but from there. I like trying pad thai at different Thai places. But sometimes you go to something and you get random. Well, remember we used to do trivia like years ago, and I would just tell them, bring me a beer, surprise me. And I'm not this great beer drinker that's all about all these different types of beer, but I was in that whatever thing I was in at that moment and in that period, and that's what would happen. And so I got a chance to taste more beers than I would have normally have done. You know what I mean? And I didn't like all of them. But now I know what that thing tastes like. And I think I understand something. And you know, this kind of film, yeah, we don't recommend. I'm not giving my thumbs up or thumbs down about these movies. That's fine. That's cool. That's Cisco and Ebert. That's and they're the ones who are like the icons of that thing. For me, it's like even beyond criticism. For me, I mean, there's an element of that, and for me, it's like my brain works as a connector of things that maybe are not obviously connected. Or how does this reflect some other area of interest of mine, or in a way that's unique to just to me, or to people like me. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's some asshole somewhere in India who does the same thing that I do in terms of who looks like me or whatever, in terms of like his everyday existence. I like, in my world, I like structure. I'm very structured and I'm very like ritualistic in terms of the OCD of my practice, but when it comes to like creativity and the way I think, I like to be taken to these crazy places. But it may be all this stuff that you could have that you've described in this episode, you could have described about a different movie. Or I could be describing a lot of what you're saying, like you're speaking my language today, but that's today. And I could be saying the same thing to you about a different movie, but that movie didn't transport you in that same way.
Yeah.
So you'll be like, I don't see that. So it's not obviously it's not a one size fits all. And you had the stars basically aligned for you to feel this way about this movie. And for, again, like you said, for us to have even watched it, because we were going to record this episode a few days ago, but I knew I had to cancel because I knew that I would not have been able to focus and to create that space that we talked about, that ritual chamber, and that sense of openness. Even if I had it during the watching of the film, I would not have had it in the discussing of the film, and then that would have been a disservice to everything. Because my mood would have fucked with it. You know what I mean? And so that's the importance of set, like with drugs, like set and setting, like your mindset and then the setting that you're in. Are you comfortable? And is that place appropriate for that? I mean, like, sex in a car can be cool, but if you're in this crazy chamber that lends itself to all this like luxury and comfort and pleasure, and you're in some place where you feel free and you're with a person that makes you feel free, you're going to have a way better experience than you would if it's just like, well, 5 minutes in the car before we clock in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these kind of films are not, maybe some of those Transformers movies, although they do like that evocative moment of, I don't think that's a cheat, because it's like, how is it a cheat? Like, if you, one year, Leslie and I baked these cookies that are basically from where my mom's from and from like my childhood, and we tried it. We got this like recipe, and we tried it, and then it came out of the oven, and it looked right, and it smelled right, but then it was going to be like, a lot of times the smell is enough to transport you, but it was like, I have to taste it, obviously. So I tasted it, and then she's like, okay, like, how is it? And it was like, yeah, like, that shit took me back. It was immediate. The anise, it was immediate. And what if movies can do that, but not to a place that they can transport you to a place that, well, that's the idea of uncanniness. In Gothic literature, this hauntedness again, this eeriness, and a place of like the past. That if you look at Gothic literature, a lot of times it's these old ruined castles, but it's a sense of the past that wants to return, like ghosts. And even for Freud, it's like the return, but of the repressed, your desires, your anxieties, things that you've buried that you don't even know that you've buried. That's the whole, like, that's the zombie, like that, the things that are dead, but they don't stay dead, because they come back. For Jung, it's the shadow stuff that's under there, that's emergent. In that sense, there's also like almost like a folklore sense to this movie, because that whole world that they live in is haunted. It's not just, it's connected to this shadow, this vampire that casts a shadow all the time, but at the same time, it's kind of like, was it even just like, what created that vampire? Is it that the place itself lends itself to those things? There are places that you go to them and you're like, this has a fucking history, and it's cool. Like, New Orleans is that good. It makes sense that Anne Rice and voodoo and music and food. Like, I know you hate that idea of the there's a documentary about Muscle Shoals,
Mm-hmm.
and Bono from U2 is talking about he's Bono. So if it were somewhere else, I think it would
It wouldn't be as bad.
be charming.
Yeah.
But he's just talking about the, as they say, something in the water, right? Something in the earth, something in the water that bubbles up, and there are definitely places like that, like New Orleans. You go there and you feel like, yeah, this place has its own fucking like not only identity, but it has its own set of like ghosts. Scotland has that. I mean, everywhere has it. It's just like tapping into it, and this film has it. And for me, it's like it's been a lot of times. I mean, in the past, you've asked me like how I felt about a movie, and I wasn't even coming from that place. It was like kind of like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not worried about how I feel about it. I make decisions based on how I feel. I think about movies, and it's like, no, don't seek to understand. Seek to experience. And like, what are my fears? What are my anxieties? What have I buried that refuses to remain underground? And if I were to look at myself as this character in that coffin, like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? And movies can be that. So if you're gonna recommend films, recommend them to your friend who drinks coffee and smokes cigarettes and sleeps all day, and is that person who's gonna like this kind of movie in a way that's not an affectation, but in a way that's truly curious and very Hunter S. Thompson, like buy the ticket, take the ride type of shit. Be willing to end up in that buzz, because this film is very much that. It's very things are unresolved. They don't necessarily, as you said, they don't make sense. They break these rules. They're very, there's the poetics, the atmosphericness. As you said earlier, which I thought was kind of the thing about this movie is that it's interested in showing. And so many films nowadays are interested in earning, interested in, entertaining. But the idea of something that has something not only just to say, but just something to show you, to reveal to you. Those are the things that are like, that's magic.
Yeah, definitely.
It's magic. If you're interested in supporting us, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. That's buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. Till next time.